Christmas dinner at the Sornel house had always been a battlefield, disguised as a holiday celebration. This year, though, I knew it would be different. I just didn't know how different until I was sitting there, watching my wife Mira pass gifts around our dining room table like she was dealing cards in some twisted game where I wasn't allowed to play. The smell of turkey and stuffing filled the air, mixing with the artificial pine scent from our tree. Mira had insisted on the expensive decorations this year. Gold ribbons, crystal ornaments, the works. Everything had to look perfect for her parents, the Greers, who sat at the head of the table like royalty surveying their kingdom. "Wilder, you've outdone yourself with the cooking," Mrs. Greer said, though her tone suggested surprise rather than praise. After 15 years of marriage, my mother-in-law still acted shocked whenever I demonstrated basic competence. "Thanks, Helen. Just following the recipe." I carved another slice of turkey, keeping my hands busy while my mind raced. The envelope in my coat pocket seemed to burn against my consciousness. My daughter Emma, 12 years old and sharper than any adult at the table, sat beside me picking at her mashed potatoes. She'd been quiet all evening, sensing the tension that crackled between her mother and me like static electricity before a storm. "Emma, honey, eat your vegetables," Mira said, her voice carrying that artificial sweetness she used when performing for an audience. Across from me sat Cody Barnes, Mira's ex-boyfriend from college. Somehow he'd become a regular fixture at our family gatherings over the past year. Tall, artificially tanned, with the kind of smile that belonged on a used car lot, Cody worked in real estate and never let anyone forget it. "Great spread, Wilder," Cody said, raising his wine glass. "You really know your way around a kitchen." The comment stung because it was meant to. In Cody's world, cooking was women's work, and he was highlighting what he saw as my emasculation. I forced a smile and nodded. "Practice makes perfect." Janelle, Mira's best friend since high school, giggled at something on her phone. She'd been documenting the entire evening on social media, turning our family dinner into content for her followers. "Oh my gosh, you guys look so cute," she said, holding up her phone to capture another photo. "The perfect family Christmas." Perfect. Right. Drew, Cody's business partner and closest friend, helped himself to another serving of stuffing. He was quieter than Cody, but just as complicit in whatever game they were playing. Ron, my younger brother, sat at the far end of the table, his weathered hands wrapped around a beer bottle. He worked construction and had the build to match, broad shoulders, calloused palms, and eyes that missed nothing. The gift exchange had started an hour ago. Mira's parents received expensive perfume and a new watch. Emma got the art supplies she'd been wanting. Janelle unwrapped jewelry that Mira had clearly spent too much on. Even Cody and Drew received gifts, cologne and a bottle of whiskey, respectively. I watched it all unfold like a choreographed performance. Each present was unwrapped with exaggerated enthusiasm, each thank you delivered with theatrical gratitude. The pile of wrapping paper grew larger while my anticipation mounted. Finally, the last gift was distributed. The table fell into an expectant silence as everyone looked around, checking for missed packages. "Oh!" Mira's voice cut through the quiet like a blade. "Didn't you get anything?" She was looking directly at me, her green eyes sparkling with what others might mistake for concern. But I knew better. I'd seen that look before, during arguments when she thought she'd landed a particularly devastating blow. The question hung in the air like smoke. I felt every pair of eyes at the table turn toward me, waiting for my response. The silence stretched uncomfortably long. Then the laughter started. It began with Cody, a low chuckle that he tried to hide behind his wineglass. Janelle followed, with a high-pitched giggle that she quickly stifled. Even Drew cracked a smile, though he had the decency to look embarrassed about it. "Guess Santa skipped our house this year?" Cody said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "Maybe he's on a budget," Janelle added, earning another round of snickers. I felt my face flush, but not with embarrassment. The heat rising in my cheeks was pure anger, carefully controlled and precisely focused. I'd been expecting this moment for weeks, planning for it, preparing my response with the methodical attention to detail that had made me a good shop teacher for the past 16 years. "It's okay," I said, my voice steady and calm. "I brought something for you." The laughter stopped immediately. Mira's smile faltered, confusion replacing the cruel satisfaction that had been dancing in her eyes. I stood slowly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Every movement was deliberate, measured. I walked to the coat closet near the front door, my footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. My winter coat hung on its usual hook, the envelope tucked safely in the inside pocket where I'd placed it 3 hours earlier. My hands didn't shake as I retrieved it. 15 years of working with power tools had given me steady nerves and steadier hands. The envelope was manila, legal-sized, with a weight that came from the documents inside. Across the front, I'd written Mira in my careful block letters. I returned to the dining room, where 7 faces watched me with varying degrees of curiosity and concern. Emma looked worried. Ron appeared alert, like he was preparing for trouble. Mira's parents seemed confused but interested. Mira herself had gone pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. I placed the envelope in the center of the table, right next to the centerpiece Mira had spent an hour arranging that morning. The manila paper stood out starkly against the white tablecloth. "What is that?" Mira's voice was barely above a whisper. Instead of answering her, I slid the envelope across the table toward her parents. Mr. Greer, a retired banker with silver hair and expensive glasses, picked it up with the careful attention he'd once given to loan applications. "Dad, don't," Mira started to say, but her father was already opening the envelope. He pulled out the contents slowly, printed screenshots, hotel receipts, phone records, and a notarized timeline I'd had prepared by a paralegal friend. Everything was organized chronologically, color-coded, and cross-referenced. The first document was a hotel receipt from the Marriott downtown, dated 3 months ago. The name on the reservation was Cody Barnes, but the room had been occupied by 2 people. The date matched perfectly with one of Mira's late nights at the office. Mr. Greer's face went through several expressions as he read: confusion, recognition, and finally, understanding. He passed the first page to his wife, who gasped audibly when she saw what it contained. "When did this start?" Mrs. Greer's voice was sharp, cutting through the tension like a prosecutor addressing a defendant. I didn't need to check my notes. "March 15th, that's the date on the first receipt. Cody booked the room under his company account. Mira told me she was working late on the Henderson project." The words came out calm and factual, like I was reading from a lesson plan. Inside, though, my heart was racing with a mixture of vindication and fury that I'd been carrying for months. Cody reached for the envelope, but Mr. Greer pulled it away from him with a sharp look that could have frozen water. "Don't," the older man said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. More papers emerged from the envelope. Phone records showing dozens of calls between Mira and Cody during work hours. Text message screenshots that left little doubt about the nature of their relationship. Credit card statements showing purchases at restaurants I'd never been to, on dates when Mira claimed to be visiting her sister. The notary stamp was clearly visible on the timeline document, making it legally admissible evidence of adultery in our state. I'd done my homework. Emma was staring at her plate, her young mind probably struggling to understand what was happening. Ron was watching Cody with the expression of a man calculating distances and angles. "Mira," her mother said, her voice barely controlled. "Is this true?" My wife's mouth opened and closed several times without producing sound. Her face had gone from pale to flushed to pale again, like she couldn't decide which emotion to display. "I can explain," she finally managed. "The receipts explain themselves," I interrupted. 47 hotel visits over 8 months. Always on nights when you claim to be working late or visiting friends. Always paid for with Cody's business account. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice memo app. Would you like to hear the recording from last Tuesday? You and Cody discussing your plans for New Year's Eve while I was supposedly at parent-teacher conferences? The silence that followed was deafening. Even the grandfather clock in the corner seemed to have stopped ticking. Janelle was the first to speak. Maybe we should go, she said, already reaching for her purse. Good idea, I replied. I think dinner is over. I walked to the front door and held it open, making it clear that the invitation was being withdrawn. Drew and Janelle practically ran for the exit, mumbling hasty goodbyes and avoiding eye contact. Cody stood more slowly, his artificial tan looking sickly under our dining room lights. He opened his mouth to say something, but Ron stood up from his chair with a scraping sound that suggested the conversation was over. I'll walk you out, my brother said, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. After they left, the dining room felt larger and smaller at the same time. The Greers were still examining the documents, their faces grave. Emma was crying quietly, though I wasn't sure if she fully understood what had happened. Mira sat frozen in her chair, staring at the wrapping paper scattered around the table like the remnants of a bomb blast. I think we should leave too, Mrs. Greer said finally, standing and helping her husband gather the papers. We'll need time to process this. They left without saying goodbye to their daughter. The house felt different after everyone left. Quieter, but not peaceful. More like the silence that follows an explosion, when your ears are still ringing and you're not sure if the danger has passed. Emma had gone to her room, claiming homework, but really just escaping the tension that filled our house like toxic gas. I didn't blame her. At 12, she shouldn't have to witness her parents' marriage imploding over Christmas dinner. Mira sat at the kitchen table while I loaded the dishwasher, her phone buzzing constantly with calls and texts that she ignored. The envelope and its contents lay spread between us like evidence at a trial. How long have you known? She asked finally. I didn't look up from the plates I was rinsing. Since September, maybe August if I'm being honest about the signs I missed. Why didn't you say anything? The question was so absurd that I actually laughed. What was I supposed to say? Honey, are you cheating on me with your ex-boyfriend? You would have lied, and we both know it. She couldn't argue with that, so she didn't try. My phone started ringing around 9 o'clock. The first call was from Cody, which I declined. Then Janelle also declined. Then a number I didn't recognize, probably Drew. By 10:30, I'd received 14 calls and 37 text messages. Word was spreading through our social circle like wildfire, and everyone wanted to hear my side of the story or offer their support, or just satisfy their curiosity about the drama. I turned my phone off and went to check on Emma. She was lying on her bed, staring at the ceiling. Her room was decorated with posters of bands I'd never heard of, and artwork she'd created in school. Normal 12-year-old stuff that reminded me why this whole situation was so important. Dad? She said without looking at me. Yeah, sweetheart. Are you and Mom getting divorced? The question hit me like a punch to the stomach. I'd been so focused on exposing Mira's betrayal that I hadn't fully considered how it would affect Emma. I don't know yet, I said honestly, but whatever happens, it's not your fault, and both your mom and I love you very much. She nodded, but I could see tears in her eyes. I sat on the edge of her bed and smoothed her hair back from her forehead, the same gesture I'd been making since she was a toddler. Can I ask you something? She said. Anything. Did you know Mom was lying when she said she was working late? Smart kid. Too smart for her own good sometimes. I suspected, I admitted, but I wanted to be sure before I did anything about it. Are you angry? Yes, but not at you. Never at you. She hugged me then, fierce and tight, and I felt something crack inside my chest that had nothing to do with anger or revenge. When I went back downstairs, Mira was gone. Her car wasn't in the driveway, and she'd taken an overnight bag from our bedroom. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter. "Staying at Janelle's tonight. We need to talk tomorrow." I crumpled the note and threw it away. We'd done enough talking for one evening. The next morning brought more phone calls and a steady stream of neighbors finding excuses to knock on our door. Mrs. Patterson from across the street brought over a casserole, in case I needed anything. Mr. Chen from next door offered to help with yard work, even though it was December and nothing needed doing. Small towns thrive on gossip, and our neighborhood was no exception. By noon, everyone within a 5-block radius knew about Mira's affair and my dramatic revelation at Christmas dinner. I was grading papers at the kitchen table when Ron showed up, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the diner downtown. "Figured you might need this," he said, setting 1 cup in front of me. "Thanks." I took a sip and grimaced. Ron had never learned how to order coffee that didn't taste like motor oil. "How you holding up?" "Been better. Been worse too, I suppose." Ron sat down across from me, his work boots leaving small clumps of dried mud on the kitchen floor. He'd been working on a roofing job despite the cold weather, trying to finish before the real winter weather hit. "You know this isn't over, right?" he said. "What do you mean?" "Cody. He's not the type to just slink away and accept defeat. Guys like him, they always think they can talk their way out of trouble or charm their way back in." I'd been thinking the same thing. Cody Barnes had built his entire identity around being smooth, confident, and irresistible to women. Having his affair exposed publicly would wound his ego more than his heart. "Let him come," I said. "I've got more ammunition if he wants to keep playing." Ron raised an eyebrow. "More ammunition?" I pulled out my laptop and opened a folder I'd been building for months. Screenshots, photos, financial records, social media posts. Everything that painted a picture of 2 people conducting a systematic campaign of deception and betrayal. "Jesus, Wilder, you've been busy." "I'm a teacher. Research is what I do." The truth was, I'd become obsessed with documenting every detail of their affair, not just for legal purposes, but because the methodical collection of evidence gave me something to focus on, besides the rage that threatened to consume me. My phone buzzed with a text from Mira. "Can we meet somewhere to talk? Just the 2 of us." I showed the message to Ron, who snorted. "She's going to try to spin this, isn't she? Make it your fault somehow." "Probably." "You going to meet with her?" I thought about it for a moment. Part of me wanted to hear what excuse she'd come up with, what story she'd tell to justify 8 months of lies, but a larger part of me was done with her explanations. "No," I said, deleting the message. "I'm done talking." That afternoon, while Emma was at a friend's house, I drove to the high school where I taught. It was winter break, so the building was mostly empty except for a few maintenance workers and coaches running practice sessions. I needed to prepare for the inevitable questions I'd face when classes resumed in January. News traveled fast in a small town, and my personal drama would definitely reach my students and colleagues. Principal Franks was in his office, catching up on paperwork. He looked up when I knocked on his doorframe. "Wilder, didn't expect to see you here during break. Just picking up some materials for next semester." He nodded, but I could see curiosity in his eyes. The gossip network in town was efficient, and he'd probably already heard about Christmas dinner. "Everything all right at home?" he asked carefully. "It will be." He didn't push for details, which I appreciated. Frank Franks had been principal for 23 years and had learned when to mind his own business. I spent an hour in my classroom organizing lesson plans and trying to focus on normal, everyday tasks. The familiar smell of sawdust and machine oil from the shop equipment was comforting. This was my domain, the place where I felt most competent and in control. My students respected me here. I taught them practical skills, woodworking, basic mechanics, electrical work, that they could use for the rest of their lives. It was honest work, productive work, the kind of thing that built character and confidence. Unlike real estate sales, which seemed to involve mostly lying to people about overpriced houses and taking credit for market conditions beyond your control. When I got home, Emma was back from her friend's house, and Mira's car was in the driveway. I found them in the living room, Mira sitting on the couch while Emma did homework at the coffee table. "We need to talk," Mira said as soon as I walked in. "No, we don't." "Wilder, please, just give me 5 minutes to explain." I looked at Emma, who was pretending to focus on her math problems while obviously listening to every word. "Emma, why don't you take your homework upstairs?" I suggested. She gathered her books without complaint, but I caught the worried look she gave both of us before leaving the room. "Okay," I said to Mira. 5 minutes." She took a deep breath, composing herself like she was preparing for a performance, which I supposed she was. "It started as just friendship," she began. "Cody and I bumped into each other at the grocery store last spring, and we started talking. It was innocent at first." Define innocent. Coffee. Lunch occasionally. Just catching up on old times. "And when did innocent become hotel rooms?" Her face flushed. "It wasn't planned. Things just developed. For 8 months. It wasn't 8 months of hotels. The physical part didn't start until—" "I don't care when it started," I interrupted. "I care that it happened at all, and that you lied about it. Repeatedly. For months." She was quiet for a moment, picking at the fabric of the couch cushion. "I never meant for you to find out like that," she said finally. "How did you mean for me to find out? Or were you planning to keep lying indefinitely?" "I don't know. I was confused. Cody made me feel—" "What?" "Young, exciting, like the person I used to be before marriage and mortgages and parent-teacher conferences." The honesty of it stung more than her lies had. At least lies could be dismissed as self-serving deception. The truth revealed something deeper and more painful, that our life together had become something she wanted to escape from. "So this is my fault?" I asked. "For being boring? For working hard and paying bills and being a responsible parent?" "No, that's not what I'm saying." "Then what are you saying?" She looked around the room, at the family photos on the mantel, the Christmas tree we'd decorated together just a week ago, the life we'd built over 15 years of marriage. "I'm saying I made a mistake. A terrible mistake, and I want to fix it." "Some mistakes can't be fixed, Mira." "We could try counseling, or take a vacation, just the two of us. Remember how things used to be." I did remember. I remembered being young and stupid, and thinking that love was enough to overcome any obstacle. I remembered believing that marriage was a partnership, where both people worked toward common goals. I also remembered the past 8 months of lies, the nights when she came home late with excuses that didn't quite add up, the way she'd started dressing differently and buying new clothes she never wore around me. "I remember a lot of things," I said, "including the way you looked at me tonight when you asked if I'd gotten any gifts. You enjoyed that moment, didn't you? Humiliating me in front of your family and friends." She couldn't deny it because we both knew it was true. "Your 5 minutes are up," I said. 2 weeks into January, I was back at work, trying to pretend that my personal life hadn't become the most entertaining topic of conversation in town. My students were respectful enough not to ask direct questions, but I caught them whispering and exchanging glances when they thought I wasn't looking. The annual winter assembly was scheduled for Friday afternoon. Every year, the school put on a presentation about goal setting and academic achievement for the new semester. It was usually boring enough to put half the audience to sleep, which made it perfect for what I had in mind. I'd volunteered to help with the audiovisual setup, claiming I wanted to make sure the microphones and projection system worked properly. Principal Franks was grateful for the assistance. The school's regular AV equipment was temperamental at best. What he didn't know was that I'd spent the previous weekend preparing a special presentation of my own. The gymnasium filled up Friday afternoon with students, teachers, and a handful of parents who'd taken time off work to attend. Mira was there, sitting in the back row with Janelle. She'd been trying to rebuild her social connections after the Christmas dinner incident, attending every school event and community gathering where she might encounter people who hadn't yet heard her side of the story. Cody was there too, standing near the exit doors like he was ready to bolt at the first sign of trouble. He'd been keeping a low profile since Christmas, but his ego wouldn't let him stay away entirely. He needed to be seen, to maintain his image as a successful businessman and pillar of the community. I was operating the projection system from a table near the stage with a clear view of the entire audience. Emma sat in the student section, surrounded by her classmates and unaware of what was about to happen. The assembly began with the usual speeches about academic excellence and personal responsibility. Principal Franks introduced the guidance counselors, who talked about course selection and college preparation. A few students shared their goals for the new semester. 20 minutes in, just as the audience was settling into comfortable boredom, I made my move. Instead of advancing to the next slide about study habits, I clicked on a folder I'd hidden in the presentation file. The screen filled with a text message conversation between Mira and Cody, dated from the previous month. The messages were enlarged to be clearly readable from anywhere in the gymnasium. They weren't explicit, but they were definitely intimate. Discussions about meeting times, complaints about having to sneak around, expressions of affection that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. A murmur ran through the audience as people realized what they were seeing. Principal Franks, who was standing at the podium, turned to look at the screen with confusion. "Wilder, what is this?" he asked, his voice amplified by the microphone. I clicked to the next slide, a hotel receipt with Cody's name and a date when Mira had claimed to be visiting her sick aunt. "Just some additional material about personal responsibility," I said into my wireless microphone. The murmur became a buzz of excited conversation. Students were pointing at the screen and whispering to each other. Parents were pulling out their phones to take pictures. In the back row, Mira had gone white as a sheet. Janelle was tugging on her arm, trying to get her to leave, but Mira seemed frozen in place. Cody, on the other hand, was already moving toward the exit. But Ron, who'd positioned himself near the doors, stepped into his path with a friendly smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Leaving so soon?" Ron asked, loud enough for nearby people to hear. "The presentation's just getting interesting." I clicked to the next slide. A photo of Cody's distinctive red Mustang parked outside the Marriott at 2 in the afternoon, on a day when Mira had called in sick to work. "The point of this presentation," I continued, "is that actions have consequences. When people make choices that hurt others, especially family members, those consequences can be very public and very permanent." Principal Franks was frantically gesturing for me to stop, but I was already clicking to the final slide, a timeline showing the correlation between Mira's emergencies and work obligations and Cody's hotel reservations. "Questions?" I asked the audience. The gymnasium erupted. Students were cheering and applauding like they were at a basketball game. Parents were talking excitedly among themselves, some taking more photos, others calling friends to share the gossip. Teachers were looking back and forth between me and Principal Franks, unsure how to react to the most entertaining assembly in the school's history. In the chaos, I saw Emma staring at me with a mixture of shock and embarrassment. She'd known about the affair, but seeing it displayed publicly like this was different, more humiliating. I felt a pang of guilt, but it was too late to take it back now. Principal Franks cut the microphone and walked over to my table. "My office. Now." I nodded and started packing up the equipment. As I worked, I could see Mira finally moving toward the exit, her face red with shame and anger. Cody had managed to slip past Ron and was probably already in his car, fleeing the scene like the coward he was. But the damage was done. By evening, photos and videos of the presentation would be all over social media. By tomorrow, everyone in town would know exactly what Cody Barnes and Mira Sornel had been doing for the past 8 months. In Principal Frank's office, I received a formal reprimand and a warning that any future incidents would result in suspension or termination. I accepted both with appropriate remorse, though privately I felt the punishment was worth it. "What were you thinking?" Franks asked after he'd finished the paperwork. "I was thinking about personal responsibility," I said, "and public accountability." He shook his head. "This is going to create problems for the school, for your daughter, for everyone involved." He was right, of course, but some problems were worth creating. That evening, my phone buzzed constantly with calls and texts from people who'd been at the assembly or heard about it secondhand. Most were supportive, expressing admiration for my creativity and satisfaction that Mira and Cody had been exposed so thoroughly. A few were critical, suggesting that I'd gone too far and that private matters should stay private. Emma was in the second camp. "Dad, everyone at school is talking about it," she said when she got home. "It's embarrassing." "I'm sorry you're embarrassed. That wasn't my intention." "Then what was your intention?" It was a fair question, and I tried to give her an honest answer. "Your mother and Cody humiliated me in front of our family at Christmas. They thought it was funny that I didn't have any gifts, that I was the outsider at my own dinner table. I wanted them to understand how that felt. But now everyone knows our business. Everyone already knew our business. Now they just know the truth about it." She wasn't satisfied with that answer, and I didn't blame her. 12-year-olds shouldn't have to deal with their parents' drama becoming public entertainment, but I wasn't done yet. Saturday morning, I drove to the parking lot behind Cody's real estate office. His red Mustang was parked in its usual spot, gleaming under the winter sun like a trophy he'd won for being shallow and self-absorbed. I'd brought supplies from my shop class, industrial-strength adhesive, biodegradable glitter, and a bottle of liquid that smelled like an awful mix of sulfur and spoiled seafood. Nothing that would cause lasting harm, but plenty that would guarantee maximum embarrassment. Working quickly, I coated the door handles with adhesive and glitter, ensuring that anyone who touched the car would end up sparkling like a Christmas ornament. Then, I poured the stink solution through the air vents, knowing it would take weeks to fully air out. As a finishing touch, I used washable paint to write "Cheater" across the windshield in large block letters. By the time Cody discovered the vandalism Monday morning, photos of his decorated car were already circulating on social media. Someone had live-streamed the moment he tried to open his door and ended up covered in gold glitter. The video went viral locally, turning Cody Barnes into a laughingstock throughout the county. I felt a deep satisfaction watching him try to maintain his dignity while covered in sparkles and reeking of artificial skunk smell. But I also knew this was just the beginning. The retaliation came on a Tuesday night, 2 weeks after the glitter incident. I was grading papers in my home office when I heard glass breaking in the driveway. Through the window, I could see my truck's windshield spider-webbed with cracks. Someone had thrown a brick through it, leaving a hole the size of a baseball in the passenger side. I called the police, though I knew they wouldn't find any useful evidence. Cody was too smart to get caught on security cameras and too cowardly to confront me directly. The responding officer was sympathetic but realistic about the chances of finding the perpetrator. "Probably just kids," he said, though we both knew better. The insurance claim would take weeks to process, and the repair shop was backed up until March. I'd be driving around with a damaged windshield for the foreseeable future, a constant reminder that Cody Barnes wasn't going to accept humiliation quietly. But his petty vandalism gave me the excuse I needed to escalate my own investigation. I'd been suspicious for months that Mira's affair was more complicated than simple adultery. Her spending habits had changed, her work schedule had become erratic, and she'd been receiving mysterious phone calls that she always took in private. Now, with Ron's help, I started digging deeper into her activities. We began with her credit card statements, which I still had access to as a joint account holder. The charges painted an interesting picture: expensive restaurants, clothing stores, jewelry purchases, all on days when she claimed to be working late or visiting friends. But the most revealing charges were the ones to a private investigator named Marcus Chen. "Why would she hire a PI?" Ron asked as we reviewed the statements in my kitchen. "Good question." I called Chen's office the next morning, pretending to be a potential client. His secretary was professional, but not particularly discreet. "Mr. Chen specializes in asset searches and background investigations," she explained. "He's very thorough and very confidential." Asset searches. That was interesting. I spent the next few days researching Chen's business and his typical clientele. Most of his work involved divorce cases, helping people hide assets before filing or tracking down hidden money during settlement negotiations. The implications were disturbing. If Mira had hired Chen to investigate our finances, it meant she'd been planning to leave me long before her affair with Cody began. I shared this information with my own attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Wells who specialized in family law. "If your wife has been systematically hiding assets in preparation for divorce, that's a serious problem," Wells explained during our consultation. "It could affect everything from child custody to spousal support." What can we do about it? "We need to move fast, file for divorce before she does, and request a full financial disclosure. If she's been playing games with your money, we'll find it." That evening, I sat Emma down for another difficult conversation. "Sweetheart, I need to tell you something important. Your mom and I are getting divorced." She nodded like she'd been expecting it. "Because of Cody?" "Because of a lot of things. The affair was just the final straw." "Where will I live?" "With me. Your mom can visit whenever she wants, but this is your home." Emma seemed relieved, rather than upset. The constant tension between Mira and me had been affecting her more than I'd realized. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Why did Mom do it? Why did she cheat?" It was the question I'd been asking myself for months, and I still didn't have a good answer. "Sometimes people make bad choices," I said finally. "Sometimes they want things they can't have, and they convince themselves that lying and cheating is okay if it makes them happy." "That's selfish." "Yes, it is." The divorce papers were filed on Friday morning. By Friday afternoon, Mira was calling me every 10 minutes, alternating between rage and panic. "You can't do this," she said during one particularly heated conversation. "We can work things out." "We had 8 months to work things out. You chose to spend that time with Cody instead." "I made a mistake. People make mistakes." "Some mistakes have permanent consequences." "What about Emma? You're destroying her family." "I'm not the one who destroyed this family, Mira. You did that when you decided Cody Barnes was more important than your marriage vows." She hung up on me, but called back an hour later with a different approach. "I know you're angry," she said, her voice softer and more conciliatory. "You have every right to be, but dragging this through the courts isn't going to help anyone." "What do you suggest?" "We could handle this privately. Split everything 50-50, share custody of Emma, move on with our lives." "That sounds reasonable," I said, "as long as you return the money you've been hiding." The silence on the other end of the line was telling. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said finally. "Marcus Chen. Asset searches. The $40,000 that disappeared from our savings account over the past 6 months. More silence. "I can explain that." "I'm sure you can. Save it for your lawyer." That weekend, while Mira was staying at Janelle's house, I decided to search our bedroom more thoroughly. If she'd been planning her exit strategy for months, there might be other evidence hidden in the house. I found it in a shoebox at the back of her closet, documents that revealed the true scope of her betrayal. Bank statements for an account I didn't know existed, opened in her name 6 months ago. The balance was over $60,000, funded by systematic transfers from our joint accounts and her paycheck. Real estate listings for apartments in the next county, with notes in Mira's handwriting about lease terms and security deposits. School enrollment forms for Emma, filled out but not submitted, for districts 50 miles away. And most damaging of all, A handwritten letter to Cody outlining their plans to relocate together after her divorce was finalized. The letter was dated 3 weeks before Christmas, before my dramatic revelation at dinner. She'd been planning to leave me regardless of whether I discovered the affair. The Christmas dinner humiliation wasn't just cruel entertainment. It was part of a calculated campaign to provoke me into filing for divorce, giving her legal grounds to claim emotional distress and seek a larger settlement. I photographed everything and sent copies to Patricia Wells, along with a note. I think we need to have another conversation. Monday morning brought a new development. Emma came home from school with a story that made my anger shift into a higher gear. "Mom picked me up at lunch today," she said. "She wanted to talk about living arrangements." "What kind of living arrangements?" "She said I might be moving to a new school district, somewhere with better programs and more opportunities." "Did she say where?" "No, but she had brochures for schools in Millfield County." Millfield County was where Cody had been expanding his real estate business. It was also where Mira's secret apartment hunting had been focused. "What did you tell her?" "That I like my school here, and that I want to live with you." "Good girl." But I was furious that Mira had tried to manipulate Emma without my knowledge or consent. It was one thing to lie to me and steal our money. It was another thing entirely to involve our daughter in her deception. That evening, I called Patricia Wells with an update. "This changes everything," she said, after I'd explained about the school enrollment forms and Emma's conversation with Mira. "If she's planning to relocate your daughter without your consent, we can seek an emergency custody order." "Do it." "Are you sure?" "Once we file emergency motions, this becomes a much more serious legal battle. It'll be expensive, time-consuming, and very public." She made it public when she decided to humiliate me at Christmas dinner, and she made it serious when she tried to kidnap my daughter. Kidnapping is a strong word. What would you call secretly planning to move a child to another county without the other parent's knowledge or consent? Wells was quiet for a moment. "I'll have the paperwork ready by tomorrow morning." Tuesday morning, Mira received court papers requiring her to appear before a family court judge within 48 hours. The emergency motion sought temporary full custody for me, based on evidence that she was planning to relocate Emma without proper notification. She called me within an hour of being served. "This is insane," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "I'm her mother. You can't take her away from me." "I'm not taking her away from you. I'm preventing you from taking her away from me." "I would never do that." "The school enrollment forms say otherwise." I was just exploring options. Options that involved moving her 50 miles away without telling me? We could have discussed it. When? Between your hotel visits with Cody? She was crying now, but I felt no sympathy. She'd made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. "Please," she said, "don't do this. Think about Emma." "I am thinking about Emma. I'm thinking about giving her a stable home with a parent who doesn't lie to her or use her as a pawn in adult games." "I never used her as a pawn." "You tried to convince her to move to a new school district without telling her it was so you could live with your boyfriend. What would you call that?" The court hearing was scheduled for Thursday morning. I spent Wednesday evening preparing my testimony and reviewing the evidence with Patricia Wells. "This is a strong case," she said. "The financial deception, the affair, the secret relocation plans, it all paints a picture of someone who prioritizes her own interests over her family's welfare." "Will I get full custody?" "Probably temporary custody while the divorce proceeds. The judge will want to see a more thorough evaluation before making permanent decisions." That's enough for now. Thursday morning, I put on my best suit and drove to the courthouse with a folder full of evidence and a determination to protect my daughter from any more of Mira's schemes. The battle was far from over, but I was ready for whatever came next. The emergency custody hearing went better than I'd hoped. Judge Martinez was a no-nonsense woman who'd been handling family court cases for 15 years. She reviewed the evidence of Mira's secret financial accounts, the planned relocation, and the school enrollment forms with the careful attention of someone who'd seen every variation of parental deception. "Mrs. Sornel," she said, looking over her glasses at Mira, who sat beside her attorney looking pale and defeated. "Can you explain why you opened a separate bank account without your husband's knowledge and transferred $60,000 into it?" Mira's lawyer, a nervous young man named Bradley Pierce, stood up. "Your Honor, my client was simply protecting her financial interests in anticipation of divorce proceedings. By secretly moving marital assets? The money came from her salary and the money came from joint accounts and systematic transfers over 6 months," Judge Martinez interrupted. "That's not protecting assets, counselor. That's hiding them." She turned back to Mira. "And these school enrollment forms for your daughter? Were you planning to discuss this relocation with your husband?" We hadn't finalized any plans," Mira stammered. "But you had filled out enrollment paperwork for schools 50 miles away, without informing the child's father. It was just preliminary research." Judge Martinez looked skeptical. "Preliminary research that included apartment hunting in the same district and discussing relocation plans with your companion." She'd read Cody's letter. All of it. The judge's ruling was swift and decisive. Temporary full custody to me, with supervised visitation for Mira until a more thorough evaluation could be completed. All marital assets were frozen, pending a full financial disclosure. Mira was also ordered to return the $60,000 to a joint account within 30 days. Outside the courthouse, she cornered me in the parking lot. "This isn't over," she said, her voice low and threatening. "You think you've won, but you have no idea what I'm capable of." "I'm learning," I replied. "Every day I discover new depths to your dishonesty. You're going to regret this. The only thing I regret is not seeing who you really were 15 years ago." She stormed off to her car, where Cody was waiting behind the wheel. Even from a distance, I could see him gesturing angrily as she got in. Their perfect plan had fallen apart, and they were both looking for someone to blame. I drove home feeling lighter than I had in months. Emma was safe, the truth was finally out, and Mira's schemes had been exposed in open court, but I should have known she wouldn't give up that easily. The retaliation began the next week. Someone called Child Protective Services with an anonymous tip that I was neglecting Emma and creating an unstable home environment. A caseworker showed up unannounced on Tuesday morning, requiring me to take time off work for an interview and home inspection. The investigation was thorough but ultimately found no evidence of neglect or abuse. Emma was clearly well cared for, the house was clean and safe, and I could document a stable routine of school, meals, and homework supervision. But the process was stressful and time-consuming, which was exactly what Mira had intended. Next came the rumors. Suddenly, people around town were hearing stories about my violent temper and unstable behavior. The school assembly incident was being reframed as evidence of mental illness rather than justified anger. Janelle was particularly active in spreading these stories, attending every social gathering and community event to share her concerns about my fitness as a parent. I decided it was time to fight back. The annual neighborhood block party was scheduled for the first Saturday in February. It was a tradition that went back 20 years. Every house on our street contributed food, drinks, or entertainment for a communal celebration in the park at the end of the block. This year, I volunteered to handle the audio-visual setup for the evening's entertainment. I spent 2 weeks preparing a presentation that would make the school assembly look subtle by comparison. Photos, documents, recorded phone calls, financial records, everything that told the complete story of Mira and Cody's deception. But I also had some new material, courtesy of Ron's friend who worked in private security. It turned out that Cody's affair with Mira wasn't his first extramarital adventure. Over the past 5 years, he'd been involved with at least 3 other married women, always following the same pattern. Charm them with attention and gifts, convince them to leave their husbands, then move on to the next target once the novelty wore off. Mira wasn't his girlfriend. She was his latest victim. I also discovered that Janelle's marriage was in trouble due to her own affair with her personal trainer. She'd been projecting her guilt onto my situation, trying to deflect attention from her own problems by focusing on mine. The block party began at 6 o'clock with the usual setup of folding tables, grills, and a small stage for announcements and entertainment. About 60 people attended, neighbors, friends, and a few local business owners who'd been invited to sponsor the event. Mira and Cody arrived together around 7, making a grand entrance designed to show that they were proud of their relationship and unashamed of the community's judgment. Janelle was with them, along with Drew and a few other supporters who'd bought into Mira's victim narrative. I waited until 8:30, when everyone had eaten and the crowd was relaxed and social. Then I took the microphone and called for attention. Before we wrap up tonight, I wanted to share something with all of you. I began. Over the past few months, there's been a lot of talk about my personal situation. Some of it true, some of it not so true. I thought you might like to hear the whole story. I clicked a remote control, and the portable screen behind me lit up with a timeline showing Mira and Cody's affair alongside his previous relationships with married women. Cody Barnes has a pattern, I said conversationally. He targets married women, convinces them to leave their families, then abandons them once he gets bored. Mira is just his latest project. The crowd was murmuring with interest, but I was just getting started. The next slide showed financial records documenting Mira's theft of marital assets, followed by her secret apartment hunting and school enrollment plans. While she was telling me she loved me and wanted to work on our marriage, she was systematically stealing our money and planning to kidnap our daughter. Mira was standing near the back of the crowd, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. Cody was tugging on her arm, trying to get her to leave, but she seemed frozen in place. And Janelle, I continued, clicking to the next slide, has been spreading rumors about my mental health and parenting abilities to cover up her own affair with Marcus Rodriguez at Elite Fitness. Janelle gasped audibly. Her husband, standing beside her, turned to stare at her with shock and growing understanding. The final slide was a photo of Cody's Mustang, still faintly glittery from my previous prank, parked outside a hotel with yet another woman, someone I didn't recognize, but who was clearly not Mira. This photo was taken last Tuesday, I said. While Mira thought she was in an exclusive relationship, Cody was already working on his next conquest. The crowd erupted in excited conversation. People were pointing at the screen, talking to their neighbors, and pulling out phones to take pictures. Mira finally found her voice. "This is harassment," she shouted. "You can't do this." "Actually, I can," I replied calmly. "Everything I've shown you is documented fact, obtained through legal means. Unlike some people, I don't have to lie to make my point." Cody was already walking toward the exit, abandoning Mira to face the crowd's judgment alone. His pattern was consistent. When things got difficult, he ran. But I wasn't done with him yet. Ron and 2 of his construction buddies had been waiting in the parking area. As Cody reached his car, they surrounded him with friendly smiles and not-so-friendly intentions. "Leaving so soon?" Ron asked, blocking the driver's door. "Get out of my way," Cody snarled, his smooth facade finally cracking. "We just want to talk," said Mike Torres, one of Ron's crew, "about respect and consequences." I couldn't hear the conversation from the stage, but I could see Cody's body language change from aggressive to defensive to genuinely frightened as 3 large, angry men explained exactly what would happen if he continued to cause problems for my family. They didn't touch him, didn't threaten him with violence, but they made it very clear that his welcome in our community had expired. When they finally stepped aside, Cody practically ran to his car. He drove away so fast that his tires squealed on the pavement. Mira was left standing alone in the middle of the crowd, tears streaming down her face as neighbors who'd known her for years looked at her with disappointment and disgust. "I hope it was worth it," Mrs. Patterson said as she walked past Mira toward the exit. "Throwing away a good man and a beautiful family for that piece of trash." Other neighbors followed, many stopping to shake my hand or offer words of support. By 9 o'clock, the park was empty except for me, Emma, and Ron cleaning up the equipment. "Think that'll be the end of it?" Ron asked as we loaded speakers into his truck. "Probably not," I admitted, "but it'll definitely slow them down." Emma had been quiet during the presentation, sitting with her friends and trying to pretend the drama wasn't about her family. Now she helped me fold chairs and stack tables, working with the efficiency of someone who wanted to finish quickly and go home. "Dad?" she said as we loaded the last of the equipment. "Yeah? I'm proud of you." "For what?" "For fighting back, for not letting them get away with it." I hugged her then, feeling a surge of protective love that made all the drama and conflict worthwhile. "Nobody messes with the Sornel family," I said. "Nobody," she agreed. The piece lasted exactly 4 days. On Wednesday night, I was helping Emma with her science project when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see Mira standing on the front porch, but something was different about her posture. She looked determined rather than defeated, angry rather than ashamed. I opened the door but kept the security chain engaged. "We need to talk," she said. "No, we don't. It's about Emma." That got my attention. "What about Emma?" "Let me in, and I'll explain." Against my better judgment, I unhooked the chain and stepped aside. Mira walked into the living room like she still owned the place, which technically she did until the divorce was finalized. "Emma, go upstairs and finish your homework," I said. "But Dad?" "Now." She left reluctantly, but I knew she'd be listening from the top of the stairs. 12-year-olds are excellent at gathering intelligence when adults think they're not paying attention. "Okay," I said to Mira. "Talk." She sat down on the couch, composed and confident in a way that immediately put me on guard. "I've been thinking about our situation," she began. "About the divorce, the custody arrangement, all of it. And I think we can reach a more reasonable agreement. The current agreement is perfectly reasonable. I have custody, you have supervised visitation, and you return the money you stole. That's just it," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I don't think I'm going to return the money." I stared at her. "It's not optional. The judge ordered you to return it." "The judge ordered me to return marital assets, but I have documentation showing that the money in question came from my salary, my inheritance from my grandmother, and my personal investments." "That's a lie. Prove it." She pulled out a folder of papers and spread them on the coffee table. Bank statements, employment records, investment documents, all showing a paper trail that supported her claim. "Marcus Chen is very good at what he does," she said. "Creating documentation, establishing financial histories, making things look legitimate." I picked up one of the documents, a statement showing regular deposits from her employer over the past 2 years. But I knew her salary, and these deposits were twice what she actually earned. "These are forgeries." "Are they? Can you prove that in court? Because I can provide witnesses who'll testify that I've been saving money independently for years." The scope of her deception was breathtaking. She hadn't just been planning to leave me, she'd been building an entire false financial history to support her exit strategy. "What do you want?" I asked. "Joint custody, 50-50 split of all assets including the house, and I want you to stop your public humiliation campaign." "In exchange for what?" "In exchange for not destroying your life completely." She pulled out her phone and showed me a video file. The thumbnail showed me in my garage workshop, but I couldn't make out what I was doing. "This is security footage from the night you vandalized Cody's car," she said. "Very clear images of you applying glitter and stink solution to his vehicle. That's criminal mischief, maybe even harassment. My stomach dropped. I'd been careful that night, but apparently not careful enough. I also have recordings of your threats against Cody at the block party, she continued, and witness statements from people who heard you making intimidating comments. I never threatened him directly. Didn't you? What about when you told him he'd regret crossing your family? Or when your brother and his friends cornered him in the parking lot? She was right, and we both knew it. In my anger and desire for revenge, I'd crossed lines that could be used against me legally. So here's what's going to happen, Mira said, standing up and smoothing her skirt. You're going to agree to my terms, or I'm going to file criminal charges against you for stalking, harassment, and vandalism. I'm also going to petition the court to reverse the custody decision, based on your pattern of aggressive and unstable behavior. You won't win. Maybe not, but the process will take months, cost you thousands in legal fees, and probably result in you losing your job when the school board decides you're too much of a liability. She was probably right about that too. Principal Franks had already given me one warning about my behavior. Criminal charges would almost certainly result in suspension or termination. I need time to think about it, I said. You have until tomorrow night. Meet me here at 8 o'clock with your answer. After she left, I sat in the living room staring at the documents she'd left behind. The forgeries were good, professional quality work that would be difficult to challenge in court without expensive forensic analysis. Emma came downstairs an hour later, carrying her science textbook. I heard what she said, she admitted. How much? Most of it. Dad, you're not really going to give her what she wants, are you? I don't know yet. She's lying about the money. I've seen her bank statements when she left them on the kitchen table. She never had that much saved. Can you prove that? Maybe. I took pictures of some of the papers with my phone. I thought they might be important someday. Smart kid, smarter than I'd given her credit for. Show me. Emma pulled out her phone and scrolled through her photo gallery. Sure enough, she had clear images of bank statements, credit card bills, and other financial documents that Mira had carelessly left lying around over the past few months. The real statements told a very different story from the forgeries Mira had presented. They showed the systematic transfer of money from our joint accounts, the cash advances against credit cards, and the timeline of financial deception. Emma, you might have just saved us. Really? Really, but I need you to do something for me. Tomorrow after school, I want you to go stay with Uncle Ron, just for one night. Why? Because your mother is coming back tomorrow evening, and I think our conversation is going to get very unpleasant. Thursday evening, I waited in the living room with my own folder of documents, the real bank statements that Emma had photographed, along with some additional evidence I'd been saving for the right moment. Mira arrived exactly at 8 o'clock, confident and smiling like someone who'd already won the game. Well, she said, settling into the armchair across from me. I have a counteroffer. Her smile faltered slightly. I'm listening. You're going to return every penny you stole, drop your custody petition, and disappear from our lives permanently. Or what? I opened my folder and pulled out a photograph, Cody's car parked outside a motel, but not with Mira. The woman getting out of the passenger's side was younger, blonde, and wearing a wedding ring. Her name is Jennifer Walsh, I said. She's married to the president of First National Bank. This photo was taken last week while you thought Cody was working late. Mira's face went pale, but she tried to maintain her composure. So? Cody's business is his own. Is it? Because I have hotel records showing that he's been seeing Jennifer for 3 months. The same 3 months he's been telling you he loves you and wants to build a life together. I pulled out more photos, Cody and Jennifer at restaurants, holding hands in parking lots, entering hotels together. He's been playing you the same way he played his other girlfriends. You're not special, Mira. You're just convenient. She was staring at the photos with growing horror, finally understanding that her great romance was just another lie in a relationship built on deception. But here's the really interesting part, I continued. Jennifer Walsh doesn't know about you. Her husband doesn't know about either of you. And Cody's been telling her the same stories he told you, that he's ready to settle down, that she's the love of his life, that they have a future together. You're making this up. Am I? Call him right now. Ask him where he was Tuesday afternoon when he told you he was showing houses to clients. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands, but didn't make the call. He won't answer, I said. Because he's with Jennifer right now. They're having dinner at Romano's, the same restaurant where he took you for your first date. I knew this because I'd been following them for a week, documenting every meeting, every lie, every moment that proved Cody Barnes was exactly the predator I'd always known him to be. Now, I continued, let's talk about your forged documents. I pulled out Emma's photographs of the real bank statements, along with a letter from a forensic accountant I'd hired to analyze the forgeries. Marcus Chen is very good at creating fake documents, I said, but he's not perfect. The paper stock is wrong, the font doesn't match bank standards, and the account numbers don't follow the proper sequence. A real forensic analysis would expose them in about 5 minutes. Mira was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks as the reality of her situation became clear. But here's what really destroys your case, I said, pulling out the final document. Chen's invoice for services rendered, including a detailed breakdown of charges for document creation and financial history reconstruction. Her face went completely white. How did you get that? Chen's office was burglarized last week. Very professional job. They only took client files and billing records. The police think it was corporate espionage, but between you and me, I think someone just wanted to expose the truth about his business practices. It wasn't true, of course. Ron's friend in private security had simply hacked Chen's computer system and downloaded everything, but Mira didn't need to know the details. So here's your choice, I said, leaning forward. You can try to fight me in court with forged documents and a boyfriend who's already moved on to his next victim, or you can accept defeat gracefully and try to salvage what's left of your reputation. What do you want? Everything I said before. Return the money, drop your custody claims, and get out of our lives. You have 48 hours. She stood up unsteadily, gathering her purse and the worthless documents she'd brought. This isn't over, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Yes, it is. After she left, I poured myself a drink and called Emma to let her know she could come home the next day. Then I called Patricia Wells to update her on the situation. You've been busy, she said after I'd explained about the photographs and the forensic analysis. I believe in being thorough. What if she doesn't comply with your demands? She will, she doesn't have any choice. Friday morning brought a call from Cody Barnes. His voice was shaking with rage and desperation. What did you tell her? He demanded. The truth. About Jennifer. About your pattern of behavior. About what you really are. You don't know anything about me. I know you're a coward and a liar who preys on vulnerable women. I know you've destroyed at least 4 marriages in the past 5 years. And I know you're about to lose everything when Jennifer's husband finds out what you've been doing. You stay away from Jennifer. I don't need to go near Jennifer. Mira's going to tell her everything, probably today. The line went quiet for a long moment. What do you want? He asked finally. Nothing from you. You're finished in this town. Pack up your business and find somewhere else to spread your poison. And if I don't? Then Jennifer's husband gets copies of all the photos and hotel receipts, along with documentation of your previous affairs and the pattern of financial manipulation you use on your victims. I hung up before he could respond. By Saturday afternoon, both Mira and Cody had left town. Mira's car was gone from Janelle's driveway, and Cody's real estate office had a "closed indefinitely" sign in the window. The money appeared in our joint account Monday morning, all of it, plus interest. Emma and I celebrated with pizza and a movie, just the two of us in our quiet house. The drama was over, the truth had won, and we could finally start rebuilding our lives without the weight of lies and betrayal. Dad? Emma said as the credits rolled. Yeah? I'm glad you fought back. I'm glad you didn't let them win. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. Outside, snow was beginning to fall, covering the neighborhood in clean white silence. It felt like a fresh start, a new beginning, a chance to build something better from the wreckage of what came before. The gift I'd given at Christmas dinner had been the truth, and in the end, the truth had been enough.